You're listening to the Awakened Feminine podcast. I'm your host, 𝐁𝐫𝐢𝐞𝐧𝐬. Welcome. Each week, I'll be chatting with thought leaders from around the world as they share the love and wisdom they've picked up along the way in this journey called life. Whether it be their stories, lessons, tips, or expertise in the field, you'll be sure to get your weekly dose of inspiration and tools on how to lead a soul-aligned life. Let's go. Hello and welcome to the Awakened Feminine podcast live. Today I have the beautiful Brienne Hennessy with me. She is a voice activator guiding women to harness their most natural speaking voice with ease, presence, and power so that they can speak as their true selves. Welcome, Brienne.
Lovely to be here. And I so appreciate this invitation. It's been a few months in the making, so I just honor that we're here today.
I'm so excited for our conversation. So, Brienne, I would love to start off with asking you the question that I always ask my guests, and that is, what does the term the awakened feminine mean to you?
The first thing that came to mind was essentially how I woke up wanting to embody it this morning. And it is 8:30 a.m. where I am right now in the world, and this is not my normal time to be up and judged, as it were. Yet, to me, it comes from choosing that place within that is already our divinity, that comes in masculine and feminine forms, and to really lean into that. And that can be in belief, behavior, aesthetic, all of that combined, but it has to be something that is accessing the level that is beyond understanding, accessing our higher self, our higher being. And to me, I would not have known what that term meant at all if you and I had met even 4 years ago. So I just think it's really amazing, not only our synchronicity of when we met and what you bring to the world, but also now my understanding. And I don't know that there's always words to describe it. We were just laughing about how I love to speak in GIFs or GIFs if you prefer. And sometimes that's all there is. There's the energy of it. There's the visual of it. There's the being. And to me, being in my feminine without having the push or the conditions of the external world feels like my higher goddess self.
I love that answer. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for being here when it's not your usual time.
Yeah.
So I very much appreciate it.
Starts my day off on a beautiful, beautiful foot. So that's great.
Thank you so much. And gosh, when we met sometime last year, wasn't it?
Just trying to calculate that this morning, and I didn't have a chance to scroll back through all of our things. I want to say almost a year ago is what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
And then the more we were chatting last summer, especially, I just see last summer as kind of like, oh my gosh, all these things that we just resonated together with. So yeah, I feel like a year though. That seems
right. I feel like maybe a year or just over. But yeah, me and Brienne have the best chats, and so I was just so excited that she's here. And like you said, if you ask me that question, if I ask myself that question, what does the term the awakened feminine mean to me? I would not have a clue. I wouldn't even know what awakened feminine even meant. So it's
breaking them up into the two words, right? What does awakening mean? And that's everybody's individual journey, let alone, I imagine, and I would love to hear your take on this, the feminine is having its own reclamation, and yet we have to always define what we mean by that, because it's had a lot of shadow to it as well. So yeah, exactly. The two words alone are juicy with what in the world, can it mean for someone, and what's possible with that.
Exactly. And it's always evolving, it's always changing as we step more into our feminine power or learn more about the masculine. powers
Mm-hmm.
that we have
Precisely.
within us as well. So yeah,
Precisely.
it's just so interesting when like my guests give the answer and I'm just like, oh, that's so juicy. Yes, yes, yes. And I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a little bit different, but it's still the same thread. So that's what I love
That's what
about
I
it.
was wondering. Do you feel, because I imagine, if in those moments, it's always an evolution, like you said, and you just know it when you hear it, know it when you see it, even though so many people are waking up to their inner power, to what that means to have their masculine and feminine side. And I just want, for myself, and I'll be curious to hear you, Kaki, I do not mean gender or sex differences. We are talking energetic components that is in the realm of source, universe, God, divine is how you'll often hear me refer to it. And now knowing how much I pushed, martyred myself, made things almost a little too independent, it's fascinating to see now what it means to allow, receive, be without it feeling less than, without it
Mm.
feeling like you're not enough or you're not worthy. And this isn't passive. This isn't just like go with the flow. That's gotten bastardized, if you will. I don't know if you will. No, not the intent, but you know that inner flow when you're in space of receiving in feminine mode, but also supported in divine masculine as well. Can I share like an image that came this morning when I was journaling?
Yeah, of course.
Would that be okay?
Do you have to
Fabulous.
ask? You don't need to
I
ask.
wasn't expecting to like talk about what I was journaling this morning, but okay. So when I call it my divine dialogue, and divine and I dialogue, and it's me honing in, listening, and more and more learning to surrender and submit. Again, we're not talking like submission. We're talking like, here's the path. I have laid it out for you. Now you must follow because this is the flow, that is available to you. So I was kind of just journaling, writing, and I had this image, and it's come in different ways before, in this sense of having like, think of it like divine masculine, just space and almost hands. It wasn't fully in the shape of hands, kind of surround the sides and back of me, and almost like leading me through a crowd and guiding through. And at one point I felt my body go, and just lean back, leaning into that support without questioning it, without making it a story out of it. I just be like, okay, cool. So I need, going a little this way. And in that, then just moving, being, nurturing in the ways that came through. But it was this lovely, like, dance in a way. And just to physically feel that, when I used to shut it off or not even be aware that that was something to welcome in, has been a huge leap even in the last year. And I just find that so fantastic that we can tap into those energies. So again, there's not always words, but it is this sense of structure with the river flowing, the river banks and the flow within to whatever amplitude and intensity. And you have to trust because you can't see the end of the river.
I love that. And it makes so much sense to have that structure, because if there was no structure holding the water, then you'll just spill all over into.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Yeah.
So
it's so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that imagery. Thank you for sharing that. So, Brienne, I really want to get into how you got into the work that you do. Can you share a bit about your story, about, why you do what you do and how you decided to go down this path?
Yeah, absolutely. My initial introduction to anything related to communication was actually in undergraduate school. I went to undergraduate school at the University of Victoria in British Columbia, Canada, and gorgeous place. Highly recommend everyone go. And at that time, it was a linguistics 101 class that I had as an elective. I hadn't even intended to go into school for that. And that really started to open up what I already had been loving most of my life. I used to write poetry when I was little. I love to communicate and talk. That's a big thing. And I also was just fascinated in noticing that I could just sense things about how other people were actually feeling meaning behind it. I couldn't have described it as this then, but it definitely intrigued me. And by the time I finished that undergrad, I had switched my major to linguistics and taken an acoustics course. And sound is just so fascinating. I love the power of sound. I love that sound is literally what created this universe. It is one of those energies that we know and we don't know. And yeah, I love it. And so it kind of started bubbling up that I wanted to focus on voice. I did a couple of research projects relative to voice. There was just something that drew me. And I remember seeing this image of myself kind of flash in, of being kind of like on a stage, but in the wings, and supporting whoever is the voice out in that stage. So I just remember that coming in thinking like, yeah, that would be amazing. Like that just feels really good. So fast forward to graduate school, I got into one of the top programs in the country, in the US, for voice, specifically for speech pathology. So that's my background. And I spent 14 years with the honor of being in some of the top voice clinics in the US. And essentially what that means is I was on the rehabilitative side, taking care of assessing and therapeutically recovering voices that had already experienced some sort of injury that were disrupting people's quality of life so much they had to go see the specialists. And that was really rewarding in a lot of ways. It is amazing to me how much we take this instrument for granted, and we can't always predict when something's going to change with it, as with most of our body in that way. And also it started to become apparent that the types of injuries, there's many, and we have some sense of risk factors for certain injuries. Say if a teacher or an educator is in the classroom and they are talking extensively, but they've just come off summer. So they figure, it's summer, I've rested, it's fine, I'll just go right into the classroom and start talking 8 hours a day. And that would be like asking the marathon runner to get off the couch and go run the marathon with no conditioning and no training. So there's that kind of risk, but there's also folks who would come in, particularly women, who would say, I don't know, something, this just isn't my voice. It's starting to hurt. I don't feel like I'm being heard. I'm projecting, but like no one's listening to me. And these were women who were either leading teams, leading their households, or in a position of needing to kind of level up in some way. And it was showing up in their voice, that there was a mismatch with what was going on with them. And so on the therapeutic side, we can say, okay, well, let's relax the tension. Let's make sure we're getting your voice in a way that's working efficiently, and we have exercises for that. But what was fascinating with that, the more I sat with them and we would start talking about things that were going on with it, stress factors, emotional factors. Sure, we know these can play a role, but truly it felt like, especially for many of them, comes from a place of just such disconnect from their own self-worth. And that's not something they teach you about in speech pathology grad school, I can tell you. So I felt very honored that, interestingly, my own personal journey had taught me a lot about my self-worth and when I wasn't connected to it and what transpired to connect me to it. And by the time the idea floated in to step out on my own, I felt like it was really this next level of preventative wellness, preventative care for an instrument that does need conditioning when you're speaking hours on end or require your voice for your livelihood. But also, this is a conduit to our wellness. This is a conduit to us showing up and being expressive, being heard, speaking in a way that we know is us. Not everybody speaks in the way that is actually them. We all know somebody. Maybe we don't necessarily want to call them out to it, but whether it's what they're saying or how they sound, or you don't believe quite what's underneath that, I think the voice is a beautiful and powerful way to align who we are with what we're saying, what our beliefs are. And so when I jumped into the realm of entrepreneur, business owner world, it opened up a whole new level of how we can be proactive in these things, how we can take care of ourselves in these unique ways and not take this instrument for granted. Yeah.
Wow. It's so fascinating how our body is constantly giving us clues on when we are misaligned.
Yes, exactly. Do you find, and in that vein, do you find, 𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐞, there's something, because I'm sure everybody listening has something where they're like, oh, we usually put an extreme to it. I always get X, Y, or Z. Do you have something that comes up in your body that is the kind of, hello, I'm talking to you, pay attention to me?
Well, the most recent thing that's been coming up is anger, so emotions,
Mm. Yep, more
because that's
emotional.
something I've always suppressed. Like, 𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐞
Yeah,
doesn't get angry, so I've
right.
been suppressing that. So the most recent thing that tells me I'm misaligned is anger or rage.
Mm.
Previously, probably when I start feeling like I just have this feeling in my body where I'm like, something's off, I need to stop, but I don't really know. I'm just going to
Yeah.
keep pushing and then I get sick. So that's usually my thing, to know that I need to recalibrate or just stop and reassess what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, I mean, as you know, not alone in that. And the dis-ease can show up in a lot of different ways. Yeah. And voice is definitely not immune to that, in the sense that, a lot of folks I work with are the frequent laryngitis folks. Oh, I get laryngitis multiple times a year. That's not normal to get it multiple times a year, or to feel like the voice isn't as strong as it could be, or to feel, and was my experience before a lot of my own initial awakening. Again, didn't know that word at the time, but now hindsight, my tone of voice. I can't even tell you how many times people would say to me they didn't like my tone of voice. And I was like, what? What's going on? Like, I'm just trying to be heard. And it was 100% me, like pushing to be heard, to express, to say what I thought was needing to be said, while also having some reactive streaks. Definitely some anger to alchemize in that. And so it can come across in a lot of different ways. And when that happens, that can be really disheartening, because it's almost as if your own voice is betraying you, but you don't know why. You're like, but I don't know why you're not hearing me the way I intended, or what tone. Usually I couldn't understand what they meant, but just, again, yeah, like you said, something was off and I was like, oh, okay. So it's fascinating the way our body does speak to us. And for those of you listening, it doesn't mean that, I mean, 𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐞 and I both just shared embodiment was not a word I used. I didn't know that you could really tune in more deeply to these things and the wisdom that our bodies hold. So I just want to encourage those of you who aren't even sure yet what that might mean. Know that it's there when you first become aware of that, something feels off. And that's where I think with voice, it's a really concrete way for folks to tap into that, sometimes even more initially than like the emotional piece, because they're not maybe ready to go to that level of like, what's the emotion underlying this, but they know that something physically is not as reliable, not as stable, not as clear as they want it to be. I have a client right now and she wants her voice to be more assertive, express herself more. And so, yes, there is a lot of the emotional undercurrent that we're addressing with that. But more importantly, when she starts to express herself, interestingly, her voice wavers at first. Her voice is unstable. Why is that?
Mm.
Because there's been years and situation after situation of it operating from this slightly misaligned place. So we can't discount that sense of, yeah, you're cruising along. You may be getting your message across in some way, but if it doesn't feel like you are in the zone, being heard, having that exchange in a way that lights you up and feels like you love what you said and what you believe no matter what, something is going to be slightly amiss.
Mm. How can people find out? Like, because obviously, like,
Mm,
I wouldn't know if my
right.
voice is misaligned or not to my being.
Yep.
How can someone start kind of finding out whether that is the case for them?
Yeah, great question. So first, most commonly, it's the physical symptoms. It's the physical signs. So we're talking things like hoarseness more often, a raspiness that doesn't go away, especially after an illness where maybe you've already pushed yourself. The rest of the symptoms kind of fade away. You seem better, but you're like, I don't know. I'm just not getting back to it. Throat clearing constantly, doing that more. Looking into stamina or duration, noticing like, wow, I just did that 20-minute live and I am already feeling fatigued. It kind of hurt. I don't feel, I'm going to go rest my voice. So anything physical where you don't feel like your voice performance is anywhere near what it used to be, or other people start commenting. What's going on today, Kaki? Is everything okay? I hear, something's going on. It would have to be maybe a little more extreme because not everybody has the tuned in, space to hear that. Or there's in those cases of tone of voice, trying to assert yourself or being, more commanding, as it were. These instances of, especially again in women, purposely trying to put on a voice that doesn't match who you are. So, for example, if, again, particular women are leading their team and they have somewhere along the way picked up this idea that to sound more commanding, more authoritative, they're going to lower their pitch because lower pitch means that you have my attention and I have your attention and we are going to listen because I am talking very powerfully.
Mm.
Maybe the listener may not necessarily notice it, except, oh, that's interesting. Brienne's voice sounds a little different today, but it's nothing, off-putting. Internally, that person is putting themselves, think of it, in a different part of their natural speaking range, from away from their natural speaking range, to the point that it's almost like trying to run every day without ever taking a rest to just walk, or without ever allowing yourself to explore outside kind of the box that you put yourself in. So those are some tangible and more intangible things. So folks will come and say to me, I don't understand why people aren't hearing me. My voice has gotten a little lower over the years. Now, hormones and changes, or at least for women's bodies, can affect that. So we always look at that component. I try to project and fill the space, but it's like nobody is hearing me anymore. So that also is a compensation people do. Well, I'll just get louder. That's when people will hear me. And the problem again becomes, we're pushing harder with a system that just wants to work optimally, that knows naturally how to be. And if your voice doesn't naturally live down here, that is not long-term going to be healthy, because you will start to feel the physical symptoms of that too. Sometimes there's the component of people not even liking the sound of their own voice, so they want to change it. They come to me saying, I sound, what I get most often, high and squeaky, Minnie Mouse, all of these kind of caricature sounds that people think they sound like, and they want to change it. Again, we're not here to put something on you that is not your personality, that is not naturally you. If you naturally have a higher, maybe airier, breathier voice, so be it. Like, again, we look at what are you trying to box yourself in from the conditioning that we get externally, from the expectations, from the biases. So I know it's kind of a long list, but it really does depend which side, the physical or more the miscommunication element that people are getting in their day-to-day relationships, that people come to me. Yeah.
It's so fascinating. Like, look, I've lost my voice now.
I know, right?
I need to clear my throat. But it's so fascinating just how we do put on different voices when we speak.
Yes.
I do find that when I'm doing my podcast, my voice is a little bit different to when I don't know if you notice, when I speak to you normally, it's a little bit different to when I'm doing my podcast. I don't know why. It just kind of happens. Like, it's not even that I force it a certain way. It just kind of happens.
You aren't actually. That's right. It can happen. We all have, I believe, choices with our voice, and we all code switch. Code switching is normal. So code switching means that you are switching something about your language, your behavior, your way of communicating, your voice in various scenarios. We code switch, for example, my mom voice is very different than my presentation voice. Yeah, see, every mom's going, yep, I know what you mean. To the point. Okay, this was wild. To the point that, again, because that's how we just switch out subconsciously. This was like 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I had finished recording a podcast as a guest, and I was listening back and all this, and my daughter comes in and she goes, "Who is that?" And I was like, "That's me." She's like, "No, it's not." I was like, "Yeah, it is." So clearly, I mean, they're different voice. And so it's just this thing we naturally do. Now, this is speaking as a cis white woman. We can talk about the fact that a lot of, especially in the US, a lot of minority LGBTQ populations have to code switch for safety reasons, have to code switch because their job expects it, and there's these biases. So code switching and choosing different voices are all part of us. We have to, though, become aware, like that, Kaki, if you were going through your now that you're doing more interviews, you're going through these podcasts, and let's say 5, 6 in, you're like, I don't know, it wasn't feeling as good. You would know. You would be able to say, okay, what is it? Am I putting on something that I don't mean to, and delve into that? You have that awareness, though. Not everybody does yet, and that's okay. But because you said the exact thing, it just feels natural. I just flow into it. That's beautiful. That's the place to be. And so whatever voice you want to put on, the important thing is it comes from within you. You are choosing it. Sometimes I'll have my clients, once they tap into their natural sound, they go, "Oh my gosh, that sounds like me again." And we name it. They can name it whatever they want. And so it becomes this, again, choice. And then you get to go throughout your day and be in that space. When I see people get limited is, again, when they're either putting something on that they think others want to hear, or how they're supposed to sound, really robotic and monotone, or down here, like in this voice, because this has zero dynamic or intensity variation. But people hear that and absorb things, right? There's dialects, there's trends, there's vocal quirks. Okay, but do you know how to get back to you? And from there, choose how you want to show up with it in each scenario.
I'm loving this conversation. It's like, what? I'm learning so much. Thank you. Because obviously when we chat, we're not talking about your work. So I was
True.
like,
oh yeah.
this is so fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting when you say that. Because yeah, I do notice my voice changes when I go into the podcast, but
Mm.
I love you kind of validating that that's okay, because sometimes I think, oh, am I just like putting this voice on? But I'm not. It just kind of comes when I do a
Yes,
podcast.
it comes through, and it physically, we go back to the physicality of it, because this is where it could be a first little barometer and signal. If it physically feels easy and in flow, and you are like, wow, this is awesome, great. If you get to the end of them and there was fatigue, or you're like, I better not do like back to back recordings, or, let's say some people do batch recordings and they are going and going, there starts to be that disconnect. And then that can physically show up again, just because this is the instrument doing the work in this moment. Yeah.
How
Yeah. So I think
interesting.
it's awesome that you notice you have a different one. And the morning voice just flew in. I have my morning voice. I will say, I proactively did extra warm ups in the shower before this time, given that it's earlier than my my normal talking time. And so, but that's an option for me too. I could have shown up in morning voice just because that's what I felt like doing, but we don't judge ourselves for it. We don't try to change it because we think it's supposed to sound like something else. Or how many of you, I would love to hear this in the chat or on the replay, how many of you, either through radio host, other podcasts, whatever it is, go, whoa, that's like that kind of intense radio voice. And we all know kind of a little bit what that means. Sometimes it's very pleasing, but that version of it means kind of like, wow, could they be more fake sounding? Because they think they have to do a certain type of quality and tone instead of just talking with us. Yeah.
News
So that's kind of a
reporters.
subtle like side note. Yeah.
Yeah, news reporters. Because
Yes. That's a great, yes. Go ahead. That's a great example.
so there's a girl that used to go to my high school. She is now our news reporter. And I mean,
Mm.
I love how she speaks when she's reading the
Yeah.
news, but it does not sound anything like what I remember her to be. She's got that news reporter voice going on. And I forgot to ask, because my brother is like good friends with her cousin. I forgot to ask him, like, during like normal conversation, whether she still has the news reporter voice when she's like at parties and just hanging out, or whether it's just when she's reading the news.
Camera turns on. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Again, that may feel really good to her. That may be like, I have put on and been in this role that I know that is part of me. What I find most often, though, because I get they have to do a certain cadence, they have to make sure that it is clear in the sense of pacing and enunciation. It's dipped a little bit further for, again, women in particular, when they get a little bit down here. So they put their voice kind of in the back of their throat. You hear it more in the States. We have something called NPR, National Public Radio, and there's quite a few women correspondents who are about here. So it's like they remember how we talked about they kind of think maybe a little lower will carry more. People think that lower projects. That's also a myth. So lower pitched isn't necessarily going to project more. But what's interesting is, could they still harness that, again, command presence as a news reporter, as this, giver of information? Yes. And it doesn't have to be at the sacrifice of, again, rhythm, intonation, enunciation, making sure that it fits kind of that style. Yeah. So I think it's fascinating to me when they all kind of start to sound the same. And I think y'all's voices are not naturally all there, I promise you. So then what? Are we conditioning ourselves to that? Is it the implicit bias that we expect women, again, to try to sound like men because that's been our historical model of what authority is or who we should listen to? No, I call BS on that. Like, there needs to be a place for our voices to radiate and resonate. And we have to explore and play with that. I talk about play so much in our work because vocal play is the thing that will help you open up to be like, oh, well, this feels good today. I'm going to hang out here. Great. Go with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like a whole soapbox I could get on.
Yeah. And I mean, I love really feminine voices. Like your voice is so beautiful. I can listen to it all day. It's like
Thank
that.
you.
It's just this like sing song, like melodic type voice that, you can just listen to all day. So I always find it fascinating when people do try and sound lower or more authoritative than they necessarily are usually. Um, this question popped in. So you were talking about self-worth before and your voice. So you talked about like, when we're misaligned, your voice can sound different and it's like finding you and like you can, code switch and all those things. And how does the self-worth piece come into play?
I'll share a little bit about my story in kind of illustrating that. When it occurred to me that that tone of voice, being chastised for my tone of voice or being misunderstood because of my tone of voice, was such a frequent component of my communication. It also was about the time that this was now 2013, that I was going through a separation with my husband at the time, which very quickly led to an unexpected divorce. Our daughter was 2, so I was completely shattered because that is not the life that I had foreseen for myself, let alone her. And in that depth of numbness, depression, anxiety, where you don't feel anything, I would wish that on no one. When you get to that point of feeling nothing, there was a powerful shift. I was reading a couple different books at the time, and one in particular really made me go, oh, it was like that first I like that word, validation, to be able to let go. I was very controlling in the sense of how I wanted things to go or be, or when you're not heard, you push harder if you don't know to let it go or to trust that there are actually your aligned folks to hear you, whatever that may look like. So in that time, I just remember this, I don't think I was worthy of any of that life. And that was a shock to me because I knew I didn't have maybe the most confidence. I might have appeared confident in my work life and all of that, but I didn't really trust myself nor think I was worthy at all. And I became very aware of that because I had day in and day out critical mind chatter, as I call it, constantly. And it got louder and louder and louder until that moment of, oh, this is me feeling worthless. And then what does it feel like to have that little spark of, oh, I am worthy. I can let go of these things and still be worthy. I can be heard for myself first and foremost, and then be able to kind of expand from there. This is all, again, very hindsight cocky. It's literally one of these things, 10 years in the making of still trying to understand how to relay that initial transformation. It wasn't even until these last few years that I heard the term dark night of the soul, and I didn't know what that meant until I heard it, and I was like, oh, well, I can tell you when that happened to me. Like, great. Okay, that's what that was. So it felt like this shift to self-worth. So that was 10 years, 11 years ago. Time. Who knows? So in that time, remember how I was then talking about, so I'm in the thick of like working with these patients day in and day out. My expertise as a master clinician is growing, and yet I'm starting to see these similarities for people who also chastising themselves, judging, berating themselves, always having that running train of critical mind chatter. And when we have that going on up here, we are completely disconnected down here, disconnected from our heart. So to me, once that started to kind of formulate and we started to kind of focus in on that, both for myself and how I've chosen my self-growth path, but also in the way I started working with patients, the voice became it wasn't about improving it to get it back to a baseline. It was about it being the replenishing and recovering tool, gift, medicine, if you will. So it wasn't just, I want to make sure that my voice is clear, strong, powerful. It is, my voice can actually be the element that I use to connect, to bring forth that heart-centered, worthy self. I just think of it like a two-way street. It's not just something we're putting out there. It's something we can reflect back onto us. So back to the self-worth piece and the tone of voice. When that happened for me, and I recognized that I could choose to know and believe and started to feel that worthiness within and that connection, renewed connection to divine and source, I never, ever, not once, got commented about my tone of voice again. And that was the biggest shift. Why? Because I wasn't operating from saying one thing here, believing a different thing here, or disconnected from here. The alignment was starting to become closer and closer and closer. And to the point now that I'm so grateful, like with my personal practices, my discernment has gotten much better. But if there's something that I have either said and didn't want to or mean to or want to say and I'm not, I feel it immediately. It's just like immediate. So that's amazing. That took practice. And that is something that I hold my clients space for, but anticipate, expect, eagerly await that moment where they go, oh yeah, I felt that was off. So I'm going to adjust for themselves because they want it to feel true to them, not for what I'm listening for, not for what somebody else wants to hear. So again, it's difficult to always put into words, yet self-worth to me is the core of all of how we show up. If you don't feel worthy of something, you're not going to pursue it. You're not going to speak it out. You're not going to believe you can be it. It's just the core of all of it. So if our worth is inherent to each and every one of us, the instrument that we use and the sound waves coming out of my mouth right now need to reflect that. There needs to be that level of energetic signature, vibration, imprint that you're feeling, anyone listening is feeling, and most importantly, that I better be feeling. Or what? Or it's just this mismatch and we're just kind of mindlessly going along and something feels off, but whatever. No. That's not our full, whole, vibrant selves coming forward. And yeah, it's been more and more formulating for me over the last few years. But to me, I believe it has everything to do with it. And self-worth can come through voice, and voice can activate your self-worth. It goes both ways.
I love that. And that's why when I asked, when you fill in the questionnaire to come on my podcast, I asked, what would you like to name your episode? And you wrote Vibrant Vocal Alignment, Why Resonance of Your Inner and Outer Voice Matters.
That's great.
And yeah, I mean, we've been talking about that the whole time. So it just makes so much sense. Now, you're saying that, your outer voice can also influence your inner voice.
Yes.
Like we talked more about like how the inner voice, might cause your outer voice to, actually, what is it? Your outer voice and inner voice don't match, right? So then if someone...
Yes, where you're not listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and then that shows in your outer voice where it is not aligned with what you're saying inside. So how can someone change their outer voice to match their inner voice? Like, do they change how they talk, or like, what do they actually have to do?
In this, and I want to be like absolutely clear with this, when I refer to inner voice, because this is also what I've seen, I mean intuition. I mean that knowing that we all possess. I clarify that because sometimes I see people talking about the inner voice as that mind chatter, that berating critical mind chatter. So that's not what I mean. Some people have termed it that for themselves. Okay. But just to be clear, my inner voice for me is intuition. Critical mind chatter is that internal space of just often criticism, but it doesn't always have to be that way. I've shifted it. Other people have shifted it. It's totally possible not to just have this barrage of voices in that space. So, to your question, in intuitive practice, I start it really simply with making sure that people know what their yeses and their no is. The yes and no that you get intuitively is going to be different for everyone. I don't believe that it's just a gut feeling. We hear that a lot. Just trust your gut. Cool. Mine wasn't just my gut. So what now? Or, it's instinct. Instinct's more like that biologic, fight or flight, like something's awry kind of thing. Important signal. But intuition is this deeper, usually kind of always gentler, usually kind of quieter voice that is within you. And in my belief system, that comes from divine, from God, from source, that is bigger than our realm of understanding. So when we're talking about getting clear on the yes and no, sometimes that is practices that I can take people through to notice that in their bodies. But often it can start with the voice practices. And we go back to that idea of ease. If, for example, I'm having someone do just what seems like a simple humming exercise, and they're kind of playing around, they're like, oh, yeah, okay. And I keep honing them into, what does that feel like? Do you notice any sensations? Is it pressurized, or is it kind of flowing up and out? That starts to build their awareness more internally, not trying to judge what it sounds like. And so as they start getting more and more comfortable with it flowing and feeling easy, then it's almost like you can take yourself into kind of the observer. And as you're voicing, you can start noticing within anything that might start to feel also pressurized, constricted, restricted. If that's the case, can you use that sound that you've established to start to dissipate those pressures, to start to open up those spaces? Yes. And then as the next level, when you're in that mode, let's say, again, this is just one example. You're in that mode, you can start going through any messages that might drop in and checking if those are ego, mind chatter, or if they're actually your intuition. And how will you know? Because you've again established, when does it feel like it's an ease and flow and compassionate? And when does it feel crunchy, judgy, murky? Not that the voice has to be on for this all the time, but I find it is so incredible because people will just, the relief that they feel, they're just, oh yeah, that feels better. Because if they choose to go with, let's say, a belief like, I'm not worthy, once they realize like, ooh, I'm not worthy, and they start to say that, even in my own voice, I can feel it starting to crunch up. I don't know if you all can hear this, but it's literally starting to crunch.
Yeah.
That's going to change the quality. Therefore, you'll change how you're voicing, the mechanics of it, then we're back to, oh, weird, I'm getting tired. My voice is sounding a little bit raspy today. I feel like something's stuck in my throat. I get that a lot. People are like, it stops here. Yeah. Because you're literally putting a lid on that connection, heart space all the way up. Yeah. So that's kind of the way I would describe it and I appreciate you asking me that question. That's kind of one of the first times I've had the chance to put it into more concrete terms that way. So thank you. And maybe those of you listening and anyone is just like, I still don't get it. It's okay. You're here. You're curious about it, and curiosity and open-mindedness, playfulness with this. Oh, it'll take you so far. That will open up so much in this work, whether it's now, tomorrow, next year, whenever that intuitive nudge comes in.
I love that. And this question dropped in whilst you were talking about all that amazingness that you do. Is like, I'm so fascinated now. I'm like, what? Okay, so you are a speech pathologist and you were obviously very scientific, I would say, to be a healthcare professional, just like me with a pharmacist. Yeah. So when did you start bringing the intuitive piece into your work? Because I would assume that at the beginning you probably didn't use that.
I feel called out right now. No, I'm just kidding. I love it. Nope. Sure didn't. Not in the way that, again, I recognized fully as my intuition in the clinic space. Patients would often say to me, I really love your energy. Cool. Thank you. Like, that's beautiful. Okay. I thought that was more like personality. Like, I didn't quite understand that at that time. I feel like I can just tell you anything. Awesome. That's beautiful. Okay. This is us just holding space, being seen, not hierarchical, which a lot of healthcare is, depending on the provider that you get. We are co-creating. Okay. But that still wasn't necessarily like intuitive. But the more, the probably like final 5 years that I was in the healthcare setting, so like 24 of the 14 years, like 2014, 15, math, 2016 to like 2019, I had amazing clinical fellows. So in speech pathology, you finish your grad program and you have a year of clinical fellowship. It is your first job, but you're also still having a mentor and kind of learning the ropes. And in this case, the clinical fellows could learn all things voice. We also did upper airway disorders. And it was then when I would just be in the flow of a session and the fellows, my dear sweet fellows, would ask amazing questions. And I'd be like, how did I do that? Like, how would I describe that? And so, yes, I could bring in the voice science and the research we have for the techniques and the exercises and the different assessments. And all of that is awesome. Like that the voice science world is only about 30 or 40 years old. It's such a new science relative to a lot of other organs that we study. But there were some little like interrelational moments that it was beyond do what I do, because they couldn't, that didn't feel right. That goes back to misalignment. If they tried to do exactly how I was interacting with the patient, I remember one of my dear clinical fellows, he would call them love notes, because I'd be back like writing all my feedback for them. But to that exact point, 𝐁𝐫𝐢𝐞𝐧𝐧𝐞, it's not always describable until I started doing the reflections of what is it that is kind of igniting this knowing, this This is the next thing we're going to do. This is the next thing I'm going to say. Sure, the experience mattered, but that was not always the thing, because that wasn't necessarily what the patients were commenting on, that they felt seen or enjoyed or appreciated. So then in about 2018, I started working with a mentor, and she really helped open up what it meant to be into my body, both embodied practices, but also tune in. And from there, it aligned with when I started the business, when I started noticing this is what I want to talk more about. And to be perfectly frank, and I knew this coming in today because I thought, what a great space to do this. This is probably one of the most open times that I've ever been about it in 4 years. We all have our shadows, and hiding is one of my shadows, because it can feel, you want to be seen, but it feels like too much. So to your question, it's evolved as my personal practice has evolved with the intuitive piece, and then seeing that is something that not enough folks either know how to access, or it is talked about on all these internet streets, but nobody's talking about how. How? You could say to someone all day, you're knowing, that gut feeling or whatever, again, kind of boxed terms we want to use. It's like when people used to say, they would come in and say, oh, so I guess I just need to relax when I speak. Do you know what relaxed feels like? No, I mean, no. Okay. So we've got to define it. We've got to feel it. We've got to practice it. And that's the way I feel about intuition now, is that the things that it's opened up for me have been incredible, and nobody's really talking about how to do it. So I created a workshop for how to do it. Because it's one modality, right? And you know this, 𝐁𝐫𝐢𝐞𝐧𝐧𝐞, and this is what I love about our chats. I mean, each of us have our own modalities and gifts, and we go back to that alignment. When you align with someone and that is your path for that season, run with it, because you're honoring yourself. You're not betraying yourself. You're not putting yourself on hold. All signs of less than, worthlessness. And when you trust your intuition, I don't care if it's just choosing what creamer flavor you're going to have in the morning, or a big decision, of saying yes or no to a job offer, that every single moment of trust and intuitive guidance is what you're here to do and be and bring forth. I have more to say, but my sacral is going, stop talking. So see, I need to listen. This is because I just go, but this is where my body's like, you've got to slow your roll and let 𝐁𝐫𝐢𝐞 talk. It comes in handy in so many ways.
Well, I love it. You're here to talk. So I was just going to say, mic drop. Yeah. Oh, gosh. I mean, I can talk to you all day, but I'm looking at the time. So,
oh, look at us.
I know. I was like, I just went, oh, it's been like an hour already. We didn't have anyone join us in the studio today, probably because it's too early in the morning, and also quite late at night for me, because it's like 10:30 p.m. over here. Oh. So that's cool. People can catch the replay, so it's all good.
Absolutely.
But Brienne, I want to ask you one last question before we go. Well, maybe probably two questions. The first one being, what would you like our audience to take away with them today?
That their voice is beautiful no matter what. That every time that you have an awareness to liking, even loving your voice, you are loving that much more of yourself. And I believe that you and your voice are worthy at all times, and I want you to believe it as well.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that message. Such a beautiful take-home message. Okay. And I know, Brienne, that you have a special gift for our audience and something else
I
as well.
do.
So if you can share that, that'd be
Yes.
amazing.
Thank you. I would love to. So, as we were talking about the physical component of the voice, I have my top 10 voice care kind of foundational tips. This is a list of things that when you look at that list, do not have to do all the things. Please don't overwhelm yourself. This is a list that you can start going through and say, oh, yeah, I want to start that a little bit to get my voice a little bit healthier. I want to make sure I'm taking care of my voice in this way. This would be like starting a new movement program for your body. Just little bits that you want to start playing with. Some of you may look at the list and go, oh, I drink plenty of water already. Cool. That's awesome. But my mouth still gets dry in the morning. Great. Then you probably want to look at like the steaming and the humidification piece. So look at it from the lens of where you are and where you want to be. But I'm just eager to have more folks understand just simple ways that you can keep your voice functioning through all the seasons. Allergies, colds, stressful visits with in-laws, who knows, whatever the case may be. Lots of reasons
Children.
people are like hollering room to room, trying to get their attention for the 100th time. Yeah, could be. So I hope y'all enjoy that. And that will invite you into my email community where I talk about lots more things relative to voice and reflections on that. And relative to the intuition side and intuitive voice, I have a workshop coming up April 26th, 9 a.m. Central Time in the US, and virtual, obviously. And that is open to 10 folks. And we are going to talk about just that. How can you start to ignite that intuitive knowing? Again, you may be curious. You may have felt a connection to your intuition and maybe it's kind of faded. You are wanting to know what it feels like to be more in your body. And that one I'm really excited about because it gives you that moment of well-being and self-care, and it's an intimate space to be heard.
Amazing. I'll have all the links in the show notes so people can get their list and also to have a look at your workshop. And Brienne.
Oh, can I say one more thing, Miss Cox?
Oh, yes.
I know. I just remembered because I was so excited this came in last night. So that's why I want to make sure. So I also, when you see the links, there's going to be a code, and I'm going to send that to you, 𝐁𝐫𝐢𝐞𝐧𝐧𝐞, specific to your audience and the listeners of this episode for $5 off the workshop. So normally it's only $44, but y'all get $5 off for being here, being part of 𝐁𝐫𝐢𝐞𝐧𝐧𝐞's wonderful audience, and it's unique to y'all. So I'll send that to you so you can pop that in.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yay.
And
oh yeah, thank you. Thank you all for listening.
And if people want to find out more about your amazing work, where do you hang out, or where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, Facebook is great at Your Vocal Vitality. Also LinkedIn at Brienne Hennessy. And occasionally on Instagram, that's kind of shifted to more of my personal intuitive divine messages. And so that's at Your Vocal Vitality. And anywhere else that you see me around the online block, say hello. I'd love to hear your voice.
Yay. Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation, Brienne. I love you so much.
I appreciate you.
And
I know.
Yeah, I'm just
so great.
Yeah, I can't wait to, share this even wider. And yeah, I have Jessie, our dear sister, in 8 hours. So I'll be on here again live in 8 hours.
So you go rest, get some good sleep. Yep.
But
we'll just switch times.
Yeah.
You'll be in your early morning.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was delightful. And again, the space that you provide truly does ignite new levels of where people want to experience being heard. And that's really important. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.